If you don't figure out how to do this, you'll never make any genuine progress as a music producer, or maybe in anything. Hey guys, it's Kobi McCoull. Welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Tunes. I have a few things to show you today, a beat breakdown and a very important top tip. But first, I'm waiting on a special delivery and I think it might have just arrived.
I don't know how to get out of this hell. It doesn't help that I'm blaming myself. Leave it in yesterday, let it float away. La love, la love, la love.
So, let's get into the beat breakdown for today. For this beat, I wanted to test a new plugin from McCoull Beats called The Sauce, originally now updated to Secret Sauce. I actually think I'll do a review of the plugin, but because they've been doing some updates since the release, it's not actually available right now, but it should be very soon, and as soon as it is, I think I'll make a review video on it, because I think I've got quite a range of things to say about it. But because of that, I started with the instruments. I wanted to start with something relatively simple to test the secret sauce and see how good it could be. So I found a distant piano sound and another synth from within FL Studio that sounds quite basic on its own. So I'll show you both of those. Starting off with the piano. That's what it sounds like on its own. This is what the sauce looks like. I put this frost effect on it, and you can choose from a variety of different presets, and I just used the frost preset and then decided to tweak about the parameters a little bit and see what I could get out of it. Now, if I take the sauce off of the sound, this is what the piano sounds like. So it's a really lovely ambient space sound, but it's very forward and in your face, and I didn't want it to be so commanding, and the sauce managed to capture the sound and then add some shimmer to it, which I really appreciated. And frost is definitely the best way to describe that, I would say. Then I took this swell pad that on its own sounds like this. Now, if I take the sauce off of it, this is what it sounds like. And it's basically just a really simple synth sound from one of the basic FL Studio plugins. I wanted to add that spacious, breathy feeling to it and make it ebb and flow, and the sauce did that perfectly. But you will also hear that it's sliding and there's a pitch bend, and that I actually used gross beat for, so I'll show you how I did that. I sent the space piano and the space sauce that I was just showing you there all to one instrument bus that I could then put two gross beat plugins on and then automate the gross beat up and down here with an automation so that it did what I wanted to when I wanted it to. And I also used a volume automation to control how much of the sound was coming through at any one point. But this little piano lick or riff that I put here, I sent to a separate instrument bus. Then I just programmed in some reverse sounds and also automated the pan and the rate of the pan. And most of what happens with the instrumental was dictated by how the drums were behaving. So I got the basic sounds of the instrumental and then made the drums and then automated the instruments. So it wasn't just I did all the instruments themselves and then did only the drums. I usually start with the basic layers, so go instrument, drums, add in other things, and then go back over it again and add in more effect. That way you can get the whole thing to sound much more together. So I'll show you what I did with the drums. I started off with this basic kick and snare. As you can see with the kick, I put them on slightly different tones, and I also changed the volume of them as well so that it had that pulse. Rather than them just all being the same. As you can see throughout all of this, controlling dynamics is so essential, because if you just have everything at the same sound, that makes it feel robotic, and people like something feeling more human. I then just added in hats to make it kind of bounce. I've had this bongo loop for a while, and out of pure interest I wanted to see what it would sound like off the top of that drum beat, so I threw it in and I really loved what it sounded like. And then I just wanted to amplify that even more by adding in some shakers and a ticking clock in the main parts of the song. And as ever, I just take it on and off accordingly. And where else could I go from there than to add in the sub bass? And this time I didn't use 808s, I just used a sub bass that I designed in Serum. I also used Grosbeat on the sub bass just to get it to pitch bend slightly at the end of each phrase. And then also within Serum, I had the portamento set up so that the notes would slide if I put one note after the other, just to give it that flowy feel to go with the rest of the instrumental. And I was really pleased with the way that that came out. I also used the sauce on the sub bass, and it's pretty cool what it seems to do to the sub. One of the main problems is that the volume changes quite significantly. It adds a lot of gain to the sounds whilst also adding the effects, which makes it hard to make a direct comparison, but it does seem to add a nice amount of saturation and I think some compression. It really gives it presence without it overwhelming the mix. That's it without the sauce. Here's it with the sauce. And I was just really satisfied with the way that that sounded. I also sidechained it to the drums, or the kick predominantly, so that it would give that nice feeling of togetherness. The little lead piano that I was talking about earlier is also quite simple. All of this was put in via MIDI, and then I just bounced it out to a WAV file so that it was easier for the project to handle, and also so I could screen record. And once again, the dynamics in that piano were really important, so I didn't just plug in the MIDI, I actually played it in and didn't quantize it. I just moved the notes slightly so that they had the exact expression that I wanted them to. The only other thing that I added on top were the vocals, and this was my first time experimenting with the mic in this setup and my current understanding of vocal production, so I know that I will probably continue iterating that process and getting better using the microphone to the best of its ability with my voice. This is something I wanted to try and spend a decent bit amount of time on to try and actually come up with something that I was really happy with rather than just throwing some random vocals on it, because I wanted to try and push myself to come up with something that was of a higher quality. And I'll speak about that more in my top tip. I just created like a pad layer of this loop.
Get out of this hell. It doesn't help that I'm blaming myself. Leave it in yesterday, let it float away. La love, la love, la love. I don't know how to get out of this hell.
So that bass lower vocal, I just put a bunch of different processing on it, including Little Altar Boy, which was the new plugin I got just last week. But this is what it sounds like without the processing on it.
Get out of this hell. It doesn't help that I'm blaming myself. Leave it in yesterday, let it float away. La love, la love, la love.
which I was also very happy with. I'm really pleased with the way that the mic seems to be performing so far, but I added on a bunch of processing just to give it this thick effect.
Out of this hell, it doesn't help that I'm blaming myself. Leave it in yesterday, let it float away. La love, la love, la love. I don't know how to get out of this hell. It doesn't help that I'm blaming myself. Leave it in yesterday, give it all away. La love, la love, la love.
And yeah, I was really pleased with how that came out overall, and I don't know what I'll do with it in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Leave it in yesterday, give it all away. La love, la love, la love. I don't know how to get out.
So now I wanted to get into the Tuesday Tunes top tip, and that is to find the perfect blend of quality and quantity. As ever, these tips are things that I am constantly trying to use myself. It's rarely something I feel I've completely mastered, because most often you can always improve these things. This principle is something that's taken a lot of time and effort for me to gradually improve. One of the best ways I'd recommend to try and get this perfect balance is to use the creative cycle, and if you don't know what that is, you'll have to watch last week's video to find out. The key attributes that you needed to use in the creative cycle were intuition, honesty, and patience. And those three are so important when trying to get the perfect blend of quality and quantity. Because you can't follow a black and white rule that says, make this number of beats and you will then become successful, or spend this much time working on something, or just make one song that's absolutely amazing and then everything will suddenly change. It's having a constant dance back and forth between them both that will bring out the best in you. If you get too focused on one and not the other, this is where your progress stops. You don't want to get to the point where you're just pumping out new content, beats, whatever it is that you make. It's exactly the same content, just a different day and a new name. But it's never really improving. But at the same time, you don't want to focus so much on making something that's absolutely exquisite that you never release anything. I'm sure this will be something I will talk more on in the future, because there's a lot of depth involved in actually finding the right balance. And it's always different for everyone, depending on their circumstances. That's where the creative cycle can become so helpful. By finding the right balance, you also avoid a few very unhelpful things. One of those is running yourself too thin. If you're just constantly trying to release new content and you're doing it on every single social media platform you possibly can, and it's only a minimal quality, it's incredibly hard work, but the chances are not much of your work will be appreciated because the quality isn't high enough. Or at the opposite end of the spectrum, you're so paranoid about making something absolutely immaculate that you never release anything, then your quality is actually zero because you've got nothing to show. There are countless examples of times where I have fallen either side of the balance and had to do all I can to try and pull it back in so that I keep making consistent progress. The essential thing to bear in mind is that you always want to be making steps forward. Not going round in circles but not going anywhere, or going sideways because you're never giving yourself a chance to actually develop your skills. For me, the temptation was to say, right, I'm going to try and release as many videos as possible, especially now that we're in quarantine because I've got a little bit more access to time. Then I realized, whilst applying this top tip, that I need to remember that my main focus is improving, not repeating. Like I say, I will definitely go into this in more depth at some point in the future because it has such a significant influence on your development as an artist. But I hope that that tip helps. So that was everything for this video. I really hope you enjoyed the beat and the tip and maybe you learned something new. If you like the video, please do give it a like, click subscribe, leave a comment, all of those wonderful things. And I look forward to sharing the next video with you. But until then, bye!